Hello and welcome to another edition of Terrible Business Advice. I'm Neil Stoneham and today I'm talking to Dennis Akkerman, who's a transformational coach, speaker and author of the best-selling book about modern leadership, intriguingly entitled The Naked Leader. Originally from the Netherlands, Dennis is now based in Malaysia, where he's the founder of Orbis Business School, which helps leaders and professionals build valuable skills for the future. Now, does your business have a plan B? Sounds like pretty good advice, right? Or is it? Well, we're about to find out. Enjoy. Okay, Dennis, hello. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, hello, Neil. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and thanks for joining us today. Now, of course, you know, you're in your business, you're giving lots of advice to lots of different people, and you've got a really intriguing one to share with us today. A piece of advice you think is bad advice that's often shared by people, and I've heard this advice as well, but you're going to challenge it. So tell us what that advice is.
Yeah, the advice is that you should always have a plan B or even C, D, all the way to Z.
Mm.
And I think that's rubbish.
Right. Okay. Yes. I mean, this is, you know, a lot of people consider this to be quite sound advice that, you know, you're working on a project, but, you know, business is business. It's not always going to go according to plan. So it's always good to have a contingency, something that you're ready to follow if everything doesn't work with plan A. But you're saying that's actually not a good idea all the time. So tell us, why do you think that is?
Well, to spread your risk is also to spread yourself thin. And from an investor point of view, I understand where they're coming from. If you invest in one company or you invest in multiple companies, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But from a business perspective, I think it will dilute your focus and you try to be good in everything. And in the end, you're good in nothing.
Yes, I mean, this is the danger, isn't it? Because so, you know, as entrepreneurs, we need to take risks and we need to be, we should avoid being risk averse. And having a plan B makes you more risk averse, doesn't it? Because it's making things a little bit too safe. And you're not going to put all your effort into plan A because you're thinking, well, if that fails, I've always got plan B that I can fall back on. So, you know, from an entrepreneurial point of view, it's probably bad advice, isn't it? Because you need to be focusing entirely on plan A. And if all that goes wrong, well, then you've got a plan B. But you don't, the way I look at it is that I don't want to start working on plan B until I'm absolutely certain that plan A hasn't worked. Is that aligned with what you're thinking?
Absolutely. So that's why we have coined this term serial entrepreneurship for a reason. No startup founder is building 20 startups at the same time. The successful ones are serial entrepreneurs for that reason. And another one, and that's also where I got the original advice, was building a business when you still have a day job. Preparing for a business, I think, is nothing wrong with that. But staying in a job and maybe, you know, if the business starts to run well, then only I hand in my resignation. Well, that paycheck is a very strong comfort zone factor that a lot of people are attached to. And I still remember clearly the first month in my entrepreneurship journey that on payday, nothing was coming in. Actually, in fact, I was only spending money. And then you really thought back, what have I done? But building a business, a successful business alongside your job, that's a typical situation where plan A and plan B always have conflicting priorities. If not conflict of interest, I mean, some employers don't even allow this. That's another topic, I guess. But
yeah, I mean, I think, you know, obviously, if you're going to go all in and quit your job, obviously you do need some money to live on, don't you? Because I don't know what it was like for you, but certainly for me, when I was starting off my business, the first year of revenue was pretty low, and there's no way I could have survived on the money that I brought in. So luckily, I had savings. I prepared, you know, for that. I was wrestling with this when I started off the business, and as I say, the revenue wasn't coming in initially. I had to really plug away at it before things started to grow. I started to question this idea of, you know, just going all in, and should I have, you know, at least got a part-time job so that I can invest all the time in the business. or enough time in the business to make it work. But now you're saying actually that would be a bad idea too, that I should have just focused entirely 100% on the business and not have a plan B or a safety net, if as you call it, of an extra job. I mean, do you want to give me your
Well,
opinion on that?
I would like to make a distinction between the financial side and the plan. So what is the plan about? The plan is your business idea. That is your unique value proposition, what you're going to test in the market as a startup, and when existing companies innovate into new products, the same thing. The financial aspect is, of course, still the funding and the savings that you have in order to make plan A work. So what I mean to say with plan B is that you divert from that plan, the pivoting of that product until you have exhausted all the options. And my own experience is my first startup failed for this very reason, actually. I had a plan B, C, D, E, and F. Yes, I quit my well-paid expat job here in Malaysia to start my business. So savings-wise, that was some safety net, yes, that feels comfortable. And I understand people who have mortgages to pay and a family to support. It would be foolish to start with zero. So plan B for me is not that you have to go hardcore and eat, let's say, less food on the table and things like that. I think it's good to have savings and a financial plan for plan A. But what was my big learning of the first startup? Actually, it was a B2B2C startup for travel industry. Everybody knows when you book a flight, you can also add on insurance, you pay for seats and luggage and whatnot. This startup added other products, destination-specific products, depending on where you go. Well, first of all, I did not have a network in this whole industry when I started this. So I had this vision. I still think it can be a viable idea, but I did not have a network. One. Secondly, for B2B2C, you need to satisfy both your direct customer and their customers. Now, I was spreading myself too thin because if you look at the travel industry, it's a global industry. So I was talking to many airlines, different part of the world. So geographically, I had too many plans, plan A, B, C, the rest of the world. I was working on multiple products at the same time, a digital product, physical product for different geographies and all that. At the same time, I thought, oh, let's do some part-time consultancy on the side to keep myself busy. And then you have to do the business development. All of that will completely dilute every effort. And in the end, you will not, none of the products was good enough even to make it to the market. Luckily, I had a launching customer, but at some point they pulled the plug because of poor implementation. And actually, my time is limited. And as the only founder of that company, my time was too limited to really make it a success. So I think this plan B is a hard lesson that I learned that I would not do again.
Yeah, and this is a perfect example of how, you're trying to do a lot of this yourself, and it's quite a big, ambitious project. And yet, you have the plan A, which is the main business, but then you've got all the other bits and pieces which you could consider your plan A, B, C, D, and E. But that's actually diluting you, as you say. You're taking all your focus and all your energy off that one big thing that you want to achieve because you're too busy preparing for the plan B, C, D, and E. So that's really the danger, isn't it? That we actually get distracted or we spend too much time working for plan B, whether that's a contingency or whether it's a part of the plan of the business. So, a lot of us try to focus on one thing and hopefully achieve success with that. And that's a good way forward. But then other people will try to have lots of different parts of their business trying to work at the same time, which is fine if you've got a team of people. If you've got a big team of people, you can do that, can't you? It's no problem. But if you're trying to do everything yourself, if you're at the early stage of your business, you're an entrepreneur, and you're trying to focus on lots of different things, and that's a real problem, isn't it? So that kind of fits in with this idea of always have a plan B because, the danger is it could dilute you, couldn't it? It also, it takes away your resources as well because, you need resources to fund or to execute plan B. And that's taking funds and resources away from plan A as well, right?
Absolutely, yes. But Neil, I would say this applies to entrepreneurs, but even for large enterprises as well. And look at
Mm.
what Unilever is doing. They have so many brands, and that's also diluting marketing spend and things like that. So they are also consolidating certain brands in certain markets for the reason. Procter & Gamble and those FMCGs have large portfolios of brands. And I think the biggest example in history is Apple, where Steve Jobs returned to Apple when Apple completely lost their original purpose and focus. So when he came back, I think they had only for 3 months left of cash flow, and then Apple would be bankrupt. They had hundreds of different of products, and the first thing Steve Jobs did when he came back to Apple was axing the entire product portfolio. He said, from now on, we only have, that was before iPhone, we only have a standard laptop and a pro laptop and a standard desktop and a pro desktop. That's it, 4 products. Well, I think that's quite bold, but that is what we mean with Plan A. And all this Plan B to how many other products they have. He thought, no, we need to focus and we need to innovate only on these 4 products and not the rest of the world. And I think I'm really inspired by that kind of bold visionary leaders from that perspective.
Yeah, and I think this is a piece of good advice that's often shared, isn't it? About, making sure you keep your focus on one or two things. So I think one of the books that I read that really exemplifies this is called The One Thing by Gary Keller. And this is all about the simplicity of just focusing on one thing and how that's more likely to lead to success rather than, trying to focus on lots of different things, especially if you have limited resources and limited personnel working on it. So I really recommend to listeners that, this is a great book to look at. But yeah, I mean, you gave an example there of Steve Jobs, who recognized that one of the reasons that Apple back in the day wasn't doing too well because they were trying to focus on too many different products. And then they refined that and then they just focused on a few products. And then, of course, they innovated the iPhone and that sort of took off as well. But now they've become a company where they do have lots of products again. So why do you think that's happened?
Well, the visionary is gone, and
Right.
you don't see much innovation coming from Apple anymore, unfortunately.
Yeah. So I just want to talk now about this, going back to this idea of having plan B as a contingency, right? Because I think this is what a lot of people are interested in. I remember reading about this in your book, The Naked Leader. And this idea really intrigued me. That's why I was really happy that you wanted to choose this topic for this podcast. So this idea that choosing a plan B as a contingency when you're trying to focus on a plan A from an entrepreneurial point of view, why could that be dangerous, or why is that not necessarily a good idea, do you think?
Yeah, if you really look at the mindset on a deeper level, I think plan B means you're lacking confidence in plan A.
Mm.
That's an inconvenient truth that we have to face. But plan B is rooted in fear. That's one. Secondly, what is plan A anyway? If you have a great idea that you firmly believe in, you will go for that. If you look at sports, there are few athletes that master multiple sports, and they focus all their time and energy in winning gold medal in one sport only. And they also do all this mental training to build confidence in that plan A. And you have only a chance once per 4 years. I think if you look at it from that perspective, that is also a huge risk that you take, because it will take another 4 years before you get another chance. So what is your plan A anyway? Do you have a strong purpose for yourself in life and for your business? That in itself can be a motivator, a very strong motivator that you dedicate all your time on it. And no matter the odds, this is what you want to go. That's your true north. But it can also be frightening at the same time. So when fear creeps in, they think, this vision is crazy. This is bold. This is beyond imagination. Then the fear will take over, and the fear is the worst consultant that you can have in life, apart from basic survival, the physical danger. That's when you start to plan for plan B to Z. So that is, I think, the danger for an entrepreneur, and also for companies, established companies as a whole, where innovation is stifled, where play it safe is coming in, etc., etc. We get these Nokia and Kodak examples as well. all of these things are going to happen. So what is your plan A is as important as don't go for a plan B.
Yeah. So what's your advice then for people who say, right, plan A, I'm in the middle of plan A and it's going okay, but it's not going as well as I'd hoped. There's maybe a decline in performance or a decline in revenue, whatever it is. Is looking dangerous, and I'm starting to feel the fear. And now, everybody around me, my family, my friends are all saying, hey, you should be considering a plan B because, things aren't going too great at the moment. Um, so I think the danger of that, of course, is that there are things you can do with plan A in those circumstances. So what would your advice be in that exact example there? So things aren't going so well, you're not completely ready to give up, but you're starting to think, well, I need to think of a plan B because this looks like it might not work.
Yeah, that's a very slippery slope. Yes, correct.
Mm.
If you're forced to end your plan A, that's a different ball game altogether. Of course, hey, you have no choice anymore. But this halfway feelings, that is where things start to slide. So when you look at plan A, I think plan A is a vision, is a direction, and the execution part, there are distractions and detours. Distractions are the external noise that come in, and detours are, you have to try different ways to get where you want. And I always believe in life, good things take time. And if you make your plan too detailed, like, okay, I want to have 10 million in the next 2 years. What is going to happen if you didn't make that 10 million in 2 years and it's going to take another 2 years to get it? Is that then a reason to give up? Or if you're at the 1 year point halfway and you're not even at 100,000. If your plan A is not just the money, but for the purpose reasons strong enough, you will still continue for that final goal, even if it takes longer than expected. Of course, cash flow permitting. I think that will force you in a different direction anyway. But cash flow permitting, I think the time factor will still hold on for a longer time, even if that's your detailed plan did not work out. Because with a startup, we know one thing for sure: it always takes more time than we think it will, and also you spend a lot more money before you will see the returns. So you need to play the long game. So the firm belief in that vision, no matter the odds, no matter the detours, I think that's a very important one. Self-care is also a very important one because we try to take shortcuts, less sleep, working harder, all these things. The less you take care of yourself, the more you will give into stress and fear and all the consequences of that. Having a coach or an accountability partner can also help because it's a lonely job, being an entrepreneur. So that's also, I think, very helpful. And another way to look at it is, for me, is what I learned in my entrepreneurial journey from my coach was don't look at money don't express it in financial terms, but express it in time. Same with airplanes. Airplanes don't measure in the cockpit. They don't measure the amount of gallons in terms of airplane fuel. They also plan according to the remaining flight time that they have. So what I do is on my cash flow on a monthly basis, I know exactly how long I can last until I run out of that cash in terms of time. Now that gives me at least a good sleep at night, and I know that I won't continue until there's no fuel left, i.e. the airplane will crash. But as long as you see that there's more fuel coming in than is going out, or there's still enough fuel, even if there's no income for whatever you feel comfortable with. Some people feel 3 months comfortable, other people 6 months or a year or 2 years. That's up to you, what you feel comfortable with. But that cash flow is your fuel. And I think if you change that mindset in that way, you feel a lot more comfortable and persevere on this.
And probably a lot of successful entrepreneurs would echo that, instead of just sort of thinking about giving up, which essentially is what you're doing when you're thinking of a plan B, you're thinking, what happens if I have to give up on plan A? It reduces your commitment somehow. And of course, we've got to acknowledge it's a natural human response to these kind of things, because we are fearing the moment where perhaps we do completely run out of money, we can't provide for ourselves or our families. And that's a really scary place to be. But, what are one of the parts of a mindset that every entrepreneur has to get used to is that kind of fear of failure and the consequences of that, whether it's the consequences for yourself or the consequences for family or your employees or whatever it is. Um, so it is a natural human thing to have a safety net, isn't it? Just in case, but it can have its downsides as well. And I think we've got to be prepared to feel the fear, but change our mindsets about plan A if it's not going quite according to plan. Because, of course, that's very common, isn't it? We all come up with these great, fantastic ideas. We put a strategy together. We start executing the strategy, but, life happens and it doesn't always go the way we plan. Sometimes it might be our fault. Sometimes it might be external factors that we can't do anything about. So the best way forward is to start thinking, right, instead of doing a plan B, let's focus on how we can maybe pivot a little bit with plan A. Because I think you mentioned the word detour there, didn't you? So rather than sort of completely different thing, that you're doing a detour to plan A, or just maybe looking at the things that aren't working with plan A and ditching those things, and then looking at the things that are working with plan A and trying to build on those. And as you say, it's a long game, isn't it? It's not something you can expect to happen overnight. And I know you've got lots of experience. You write about that in your book, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. I learned it the hard way in that sense.
Yeah. And many entrepreneurs would say the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah, but yes, and I think what you also mentioned is that other people's opinion and what will happen, can I provide for my family? It's not even the existential fear in that sense. Can I survive financially? But I think it's also an ego thing. It's the between the legs thing that when it fails, yeah, you are a loser in the eyes of society. You're a failure in the eyes of society. So avoiding that drama for your ego is another factor that makes people want to have a plan B. So if you have a good picture on what you want in life and plan A, and it's really a vision, and you can't plan for the details, like you mentioned, there's too many uncertain factors for that. Are you also prepared for all the consequences for you as a person, how people look at you, they laugh at you, and all these things? Can you handle that? That's a question that people have to answer for themselves, I guess. But the ego is definitely a big factor here.
But I mean, again, that's the life of an entrepreneur, isn't it? You're putting yourself out there, and you have got to be able to do got to have the strength to deal with these things, because it's not easy, is it? And if you're thin-skinned, I mean, you either learn to be thick-skinned quite quickly, otherwise, you do run the danger of facing this humiliation. Now, all good entrepreneurs face this humiliation with humor. They're able to take it somehow because they accept it. They accept this is part of the risk. But it doesn't mean to say they're always going to be a failure. There might be a failure in this moment, but they're just, they're going to do something else. I mean, look at Colonel Sanders is the classic example of that, isn't he? Because he's one of those examples of people who actually achieved success quite late in life. I think he was in his late 50s or something, wasn't he, when he created KFC? And he'd had all these other businesses before that didn't do particularly well. Yeah. And I think he was on the verge of giving up. And then eventually he got the idea for this particular type of food. And then, it goes without saying, he's one of the most successful businesses ever existed. So, that's a lesson there, isn't it? So he kept at his plan A there, didn't he, as well with KFC? Because I don't think that was an immediate success, but he'd built on other failures before that. So let's just quickly turn this round. I think we've talked about some good advice that comes out of this, because this is the where we go with this podcast. We start pulling apart the advice and why it's bad advice. But just quickly, we can talk about the fact that I think there's three pieces of good advice that come out of this. First of all, rather than coming up with a plan B, you should commit fully to plan A. And again, you can adapt. So this is the second piece of advice. You can adapt, and instead of having your backup plans, make sure that you're adapting your plan A in a way that fits with the experience that you're having and the reasons why perhaps things aren't going well. You need to start being honest with yourself about, what you need to cut, and then what what you can build on, what's working, and trying new ideas as well. But that all still fits in plan A, doesn't it? Still fits in the sort of main core of the business. And then trust in this idea of risk and rewards. I mean, you accept that risk is part of the territory, that it might not work, and ultimately you may have to give up. I know this is another piece of advice we'll look at in a different podcast, but a lot of people say never give up. Sometimes you have to, don't you? But, at least try your best and try as much as you possibly can to make plan A work. And then, but normally reward comes with risk, doesn't it? Very few people get rewarded without taking some risks and without some things going wrong as well. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. That's why scams exist. I mean, that's too good to be true kind of things. So definitely it's two sides of the same coin for sure. So success is learning to live with the uncertainty as well. Yeah.
Yeah, but there are ways of dealing with that, like you said. You mentioned this idea of, if you're comfortable with 3 months' money coming in as a sort of safety net, then that at least gives you the mindset to keep going, because you've got, worst case scenario, you've still got enough money to last you a few months. And then usually what I tend to find happens in those situations is, you kind of worry about it a little bit, but then you've got to keep plowing on, you've got to keep trying, you've got to have that positive mindset, and eventually the money will come, the business will come. And it's worth thinking along those lines, isn't it? Being able to manage risk, I suppose, is where that comes from. Yeah.
I'd like to encourage everyone who has a vague idea of doing something in life or in business, just go for plan A. Time is the most scarce resource that you will never get back. So don't postpone these things. If you have an idea, go for it, and go for it fully with your whole heart.
Yes, you talk a lot about time in your book, don't you? And I remember being quite inspired by that. So that's, again, another book recommendation there. Dennis's book, The Naked Leader, because you talk about the importance of time, when sometimes we don't value time. We value money. We look at the money that we have. But actually the time is really important, because that runs out quicker than a lot of people think, doesn't it? Yeah. So that's another thing you can kind of read the book about, and I was quite interested in that. Yeah, so I think we've covered a lot of ground there, haven't we? Yeah, and hopefully people now are inspired by this idea that Plan B is not always a good way forward. Sometimes, it does distract you from making Plan A a success, but sometimes there may be occasions where a Plan B is needed. But generally speaking, I think don't let it distract you from Plan A. At least it could just be something you scribble down on a piece of paper. It doesn't take you too long, but making sure you're investing your time in the thing that you want to make a success is good advice. All right. Well, thanks very much, Dennis. That was really good, and all the best.
Yeah, same to you. Thanks, Neil.
Okay, so there you have it. Another piece of good advice coming from a piece of terrible business advice. And I'm going to take Dennis's word there, I think. Plan B is not always a good idea, particularly if it means diverting your time and resources away from your Plan A. So that's it for this episode, but of course there are plenty more other episodes to listen to, so just go back to wherever you get your podcasts and have a look at all those different episodes. We've got one recently on Never Show Weakness with Andy Fisher. That's a really intriguing one, especially in these times where the strong man is making a big comeback. So check that out if you're interested. Also, please do give us a rating, particularly if you like it. So make sure you give us 5 stars. That helps us to get the podcast out there. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you again on another edition of Terrible Business Advice. Bye-bye.